Section 2. The Roman Empire. Rome's fast expansion led to a very unstable government. They just grew too fast, too quick, and therefore they had suffered from a number of policies that were ineffective. Politicians became corrupt. They experienced a number of slave revolts. One notable one was the slave revolt led by Spartacus, where 40,000 slaves followed his lead. And it also, the expansion lessened the role of the small farmer in Rome, which was the backbone to the society. And as these small farmers had no work, they were forced into working for others in large estates, or were forced to move to the city to look for jobs. Additionally, there were some other problems that also resulted. There was much discontent among the lower classes, and there was also a breakdown of military order where people did not owe their allegiance to the Roman Empire anymore, or rather the Roman Republic, but rather to the generals that would pay them in money that in goods that they brought back from the enemy. Also, there was a large economic gap between the rich and the poor, and thousands of individuals were enslaved or were forced to work for large estates, such as the small farmers. In response to some of these conditions, there were members in the government who worked to solve these issues in crisis. Two of them were the Gracchi brothers, Tiberius and Gaius, who were members of the Tribune, and they proposed limiting the size of individual estates and giving land back to the poor. The Senate, the aristocratic branch, reacted by putting the two to death. And this is significant, very significant, because it's at this time where violence became the primary tool in Roman politics. And shortly after the death of these two individuals, civil war resulted. As the Civil War waged on, there was a lot of military upheaval as well. And we've already mentioned this prior, but generals would seize power by recruiting soldiers from those that did not own any land and were looking for work, and they would give them land and money in turn for their loyalty. Two individuals who did this were Marius and Sulla, who are not mentioned in your book, but they were the first to be credited for doing these or enacting these types of policies. To solve the crisis in these issues, the government formulated the first triumvirate, which was a form of government that was led by three individuals. These three individuals included Julius Caesar, Crassus, and Pompey, who was a popular general. Caesar himself was elected to the council in 59 BC and was a very smart individual who worked to support those who were poor and landless. He only served 1 year as consul and then eventually appointed himself governor of Gaul, which is present-day France today, where he led a military in the domination of that region from 58 BC until 50 BC. Caesar had gained a lot of loyalty and respect from the Roman people, especially among the poor, which made up the majority of the population. And Pompey, realizing this, reacted in a way of worrisome. He was the political rival of Caesar, and he worried that Caesar's growing popularity would push him out of politics. So what he did is he urged the Senate to order Caesar's disbanding of his own legions and to return home. As Caesar came home, he defied the orders of the Senate to disband his legions, and he, on January 10th of 49 BC, crossed the Rubicon River toward Rome and after Pompey's troops. He was able then to push Pompey from Rome and defeat Pompey and his armies in places like Greece, Asia, Spain, and Egypt. Eventually, when he did come home in 46 BC, the Senate was forced to appoint him as the nation's or the empire's first dictator. And in 44 BC, he was named dictator for life. As a leader, Caesar implemented a number of reforms. He was the first to grant much more citizenship to those who were conquered in the provinces. So, whereas early on when Rome advanced as a republic, they gave more citizenship to those city-states that were closer to Rome. But as they expanded further out, they did not grant as much citizenship. But Caesar changed this by granting citizenship to those in far-off provinces that were conquered, such as places like Gaul, where he did most of his conquering and wrote about it in a number of series. So he gave citizenship to those individuals. He gave land and poor individuals, land to poor and land to also war vets. He gave grain to the poor. He developed a new Roman calendar, which is the same Roman calendar that we base our calendar on today. He expanded the Senate. Much of the people that were appointed to the Senate were his friends. He gave jobs to individuals that needed it through the construction of public buildings. He also increased pay for soldiers because he realized that generals like Marius and Sulla were able to gain the support of their soldiers by providing extra pay for them. Obviously, Caesar's popularity amongst the poor was a threat to the aristocratic branch and to the Senate. So a number of senators and nobles were concerned about this and eventually assassinated Caesar in the Senate chamber on March 15th of 44 BC. After the death of Caesar, civil war had broken out, and there was a lot of death and destruction of the Roman Republic. It was at that time that the second triumvirate was created, with Octavian, who was the grandnephew and adopted son of Caesar, who took control with Mark Antony and one other politician from Rome. They would control Rome for 10 years. However, discontent amongst the leaders led to the eventual split of the second triumvirate. Octavian had forced Lepidus to retire. Antony had met and fell in love with Queen Cleopatra of Egypt when he was on a conquest in Anatolia. In response, Octavian had accused Antony of plotting to rule all of Rome from Egypt, and eventually went after Antony and Cleopatra and defeated them at a naval battle in 31 BC. But before he was able to reach Antony and Cleopatra, they committed suicide together. It was at this time that Rome officially established an empire with Octavian as the leader. Octavian accepted the title of Augustus, which is exalted one. He kept that title, which basically referred to the supreme military commander. So what you want to really remember about the second triumvirate and the establishment of Octavian as a ruler is that the Roman Republic was no more, and now Rome would be ruled in the form of a dictator instead of by law or a republic. It was at the very beginning of the empire where Rome experienced a period of prosperity and peace known as Pax Romana, or Roman peace, and this lasted from the beginning of Augustus' rule around 27 BC until 180 AD with the death of Marcus Aurelius, which we'll learn more about later. The Roman Empire was able to expand to 3 million square miles. It included about 60 to 80 million people, most of which lived within Rome itself. The government itself was stabilized through a few policies. Number one among them was the fact that they set up a civil service system, which was the idea that you should pay individuals to manage the government. So there would be people that would be paid to take care of tax collection, grain supply, as well as postal service. In addition to the civil service system, Octavian, now Augustus, was followed by effective rulers who were able to efficiently run the government. The Senate still functioned, but it was the civil service system that ran the government, and the number of those individuals were from the plebeian class, and also among a few slaves. Augustus had died in about 14 AD, but the government system kept its stability due to the civil service system. During the period of the Pax Romana, 90% of the population was still engaged in farming. Additional food and luxury items were still obtained through various trade routes, both by land and by sea. The Roman currency was a silver coin that also allowed for easy trade. Trade was good throughout the Roman Empire because taxes were kept low. The Roman currency was accepted anywhere that they would go throughout the empire, and there was a lot of competition, which led to better made products as well as lower prices for the consumer. In addition, the number of wars that were created or won through by the Roman Empire created new markets for businesses. Another reason why the Romans were able to dominate trade so effectively was that they built a number or a series of roads that were originally used for the military, but also then became used for communication and trade, and also linked the Roman Empire to Persia and Russia. There is a map in your book, on your online book, that has this exact photograph that shows trade throughout the empire and the types of imports and exports that were traded amongst the various members. This chart in your book also shows how various emperors that were successful in governing Rome, some good and some bad, and we'll talk more about these in class through our skits that we're putting together. As a society, the Roman world valued strength, discipline, and loyalty. Most of the individuals lived in the country. Some lived in the city as merchants, soldiers, slaves, and philosophers. Slavery was still used very heavily by the Roman Empire. A third of the population was captured in war, and they were basically considered property of their owners. The slaves worked very hard. Some of them became gladiators who fought in the Colosseum. Some were better treated. Some were able to rebel against the Roman Empire, but over 1 million slaves had died in the Roman Empire. Before the emergence of Christianity, a number of individuals worshiped powerful spirits throughout the Roman Empire. Oftentimes, they would observe the internal organs of sacrificed animals to learn the intentions of these gods. So their religion and their government were highly intertwined, and they were expected to honor them in home and also in public. The rich lived very extravagantly in Rome. There weren't very many of them, but they owned slaves. They lived very extravagantly. They made money on gladiator games. They had banquets that lasted for hours, and they ate very rare foods that only the rich were able to afford. But most people were very poor and unemployed, and were given daily rations of grain every day. Tenement fires were common throughout the Roman Empire. They were distracted, however, by these poor living conditions, because the government provided free games, gladiator contests, battles, chariot races. People could come to the Colosseum and watch these things. They could watch criminals fed to starving beasts. They had 150 holidays per year. So really, the poor conditions were basically overshadowed by the distracting events that the government put on.